when I look at, or I think about the Browns offense, I don't know, of course, there's some injuries involved and surgeries involved, but I don't know if you're talking about a great running team or a great receiving team. Now you added a fullback to change the look a little bit. What are the Cleveland Browns in 2020? What are they? They offense, defense? Are they run? Are they pass? You tell me.
I think they're going to be a healthy mix. And I think the positives come in the fact that you can identify exactly what Kevin Stefanski wants to do when you look back at Minnesota. They're going to have that wide zone scheme. You're going to run the football. Nick Chubb is going to fit perfectly in there. He wanted a fullback. You went and got a fullback. And he wants to run 2 tight ends. And so you went and got a big-time tight end. You already have David-njoku. I think there's other guys on this roster they might like at that position too. So they're going to be a mix. They're going to run bigger personnel, but I do think they are going to be a little more run-heavy than they were last year. I think that you're not going to see this spread-style offense or any kind of air raid offense. They're going to line up with big personnel, and they're going to come at you.
All right, so if you're a defensive coordinator getting ready for the Cleveland Browns, at least in the first part of the season, what are you preparing for? A little of everything? Because just by having a whole bunch of things takes time out of valuable practice time to prepare, and you may not even have to use it.
Well, I think the first thing you have to prepare for is how do you stop Nick Chubb? Because we saw what he did last year, and again, I just think the scheme fits him perfectly. He's poised for a really big year, and then you add in Kareem-Hunt and his versatility. So you've got to figure out a way to stop that backfield. And then the real challenge, you hope, is going to come in how do you defend the tight ends? That's a really difficult position to defend. Do you go small and maybe risk getting run on, or do you go big and keep linebackers on the field and maybe risk losing those tight end matchups? And that's what the Browns are hoping to create, make these defensive coordinators make decisions, especially with their linebackers and their safeties. Who are they going to play and who are they going to match them up against?
You know, I wonder when the new guy comes in like Kevin Stefanski, and he looks at the roster and he's spent so much time looking at film over the last month or so. Do you think he looks at it and says, my goodness, I had no idea there was such talent that they're giving me? Or, boy, what a lot of weaknesses all over the place. What do you think he's thinking, or is that a combination of things also?
I think he knows the talent, right? I think he knows who Odell-Beckham is and Jarvis-Landry. So he comes in and kind of knows the talent already. I think that's what the Browns are trying to sell him on when in that interview process. They have to sell themselves a little bit too, I think, to him. I think he's coming in and noticing, hey, the offense was really slow last year and moved really slow. We want to change that. They kind of forced these 3-4 receiver sets and didn't make life difficult with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Alex Van Pelt even said in his opening press conference that he wants to see more of Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt on the field together. So I think those weaknesses stand out probably more than anything. He's going to sit down and look at it and say, why did they do it this way? Why didn't they do it this way? This is the way I would do it.
All right, so is he looking at it also as saying, well, they were 6-10, but he's not going to put down the former coach, Freddie Kitchens, but to himself, he must be thinking, just get an average performance by the head coach. That might be 7-9 right there. And then you make Stefanski the good head coach. Comes in, that's 8-8 or 9-7. I'd be thinking, boy, I don't have such a hard thing to do to match what these guys did or beat it. I think the bar is rather low for him.
I agree. I think this team was better than 6-10 last year, and I think he's got to think that too. And just look at what they've done this offseason. They didn't go out and rebuild this roster completely. They've added to the roster as opposed to sending a bunch of guys packing and trying to acquire a bunch of draft picks. They're trying to add to the roster and get it better. So I think he certainly looked at last year and said there were things that he can do and that his staff can do better that you hope will lead to more wins. It's easy to say that, of course, in the spring. You've got to actually translate that in the fall. I think a lot of coaches have probably come in and said that.
Well, one thing they've done in the last couple of days or last week or so by signing Jack-Conklin, a legitimate offensive lineman. Let's take a look at the offensive line now. You've got, if the season were to open today, at left tackle, probably Chris-Hubbard, Joel-Bitonio at left guard, Tretter in the middle, Wyatt-Teller and Jack-Conklin to round things out. Second team, Drew Forbes, Willie Wright, Colby Gossett, and Kendall Lamb. That's how that looks, but it's certainly going to look different come fall. What's your first thought about the offensive line?
I mean, the first thing you have to do is figure out that left tackle situation. I don't think you want Chris-Hubbard as your starting left tackle. Hopefully, you'll be able to address that at number 10 in the draft if they don't go out and sign somebody like a Jason Peters or someone like that. I would imagine that they're going to try and address that in the draft. As far as right guard, I don't think we got to see enough of Wyatt-Teller last year and what he's capable of. And if you fix the rest of that line, so if you have two good tackles, we already know what Bitonio and Tretter can do. You can maybe fudge right guard a little bit. And you can maybe say, you obviously need to have a good player there, but do you have to have a top-of-the-line, expensive player there? Maybe not. You can hide some deficiencies if the other four spots are strong.
Yeah, you look at Pro Football Focus, there's not that much difference between the average guy and the just above average guy, offensive lineman.
Yeah, they had a guy like John Greco in there a few years ago who's a good player, but he was actually, I think it speaks to how good that line was. He was maybe the weakest link on that line, but he was in there for his versatility. He could play some center, and he was better because they had four other really good linemen around him.
Dan Labbe is with us, cleveland.com and the Plain Dealer. Dan, you mentioned earlier that the rushing attack and the passing game should be a little of each. Now that you put that whole thing together, showing the graphics of the starting lineup at this point, anyway, what thoughts go through your mind? How many more changes do they really need?
I don't think they need that many more, honestly, unless they really don't believe that Odell-Beckham and Jarvis-Landry are going to be back healthy. I think they have to feel good about where they are. You look at the skill positions; you're strong. The key is going to be Baker-Mayfield. I mean, it's something we're going to talk about over and over again. It's going to be Baker-Mayfield, progressing and fitting into this system like he's supposed to and making the throws he's supposed to make. And if he's able to do that, this offense is going to be better than it was last year. If he looks like the Baker of last year, it honestly doesn't matter if that system changes much. He has to be better.
Are you